Alright, so this is going to be kind of a follow-up video to the 204R swap. We're going to take the car for a ride. We're going to show what the RPMs are at certain mile per hour. Speedometer is all calibrated and working correctly for the 342 rear axle gear. The lock-up torque converter is now working with a vacuum switch that I'll detail a little bit later. But let's go take it for a ride and see how it does. So I like to pretty much drive it around in third gear unless we're at a higher rate of speed, like usually around 50 miles an hour I'll put it in overdrive. So with the way that the oil pressure switch is mounted to the fourth gear port on the side of the transmission, we're not going to lock up the torque converter in third gear. We're going to lock it up when it goes into overdrive. So as I'm driving it around in third gear, I am not the converter's not locked up. Right now, third gear pretty much just acts like your turbo 350. The turbo 350 third gear is a 1-to-1 gear ratio, and so is third gear in a 204R. Excuse all the noise and rattling. There's no door panels on the interior. Start to hear that turbo whistle. Right now we're still in third gear, 45 miles an hour, doing about 2200 RPM. So 50, put it into overdrive. Converter locked up. We're now doing 50 miles an hour at about 1500 RPM. And we'll come up to a stop sign here and take off again, let it go through the gears, and we'll see what we're at about 60 miles an hour or so. This is cruising pretty nice though. A bit low on the RPM. I don't know if you really need to put it in overdrive at this speed even. You could stretch it out a little bit farther. I'm going to leave it in drive here and we'll take off. There's overdrive and lockup. But right now we're doing about 65 at about 1900 RPM. That's pretty good. That's real good for having 342 rear axle ratio. Bring it up to 70. 70 we're doing about 2200. Overdrive's nice. That works out well. Hooking up the lockup torque converter, what we ended up doing was actually putting a it's over here. We actually ended up putting in this vacuum switch right here. So this switch is actually hooked up to the intake manifold, not the carburetor, and it's got a one-way check valve put into it. And this is an adjustable pressure switch. We actually have to take the hose off and go in there with an Allen key or an Allen wrench and change the adjustment if we want. But basically, it's labeled TCC for torque converter clutch. Wiring is going down to the transmission, to the torque converter solenoid. So basically, as long as that vacuum switch has a good amount of vacuum, or it's above a certain amount of inches of vacuum, inches of mercury, as long as that's closed, and then when it goes into overdrive and closes the pressure switch, oil pressure switch on the side of the transmission, it'll engage overdrive. But it's fully adjustable. We could make it kick out as we accelerate and the vacuum goes away. We can determine at what point it actually opens that switch, which then will turn off the lockup feature for the torque converter and allow the torque converter to slip, basically allowing the car to accelerate a little bit in overdrive. And then if you need to accelerate even more, or you need even or I should say more acceleration, hit the gas harder, it'll eventually downshift into third gear.